600,000 devices. Not one of them was hacked with a clever exploit. In 2016, a piece of malware called Mirai built an army that big, and it did it by typing admin, admin. That's it. It just tried the password the devices shipped with, and hundreds of thousands of cameras and routers said yes. And here's the loop I want you holding the whole video. There's one 10-second habit, one objective on your exam, that turns every one of those devices from a recruit into a dead end. It's called a secure baseline, and almost nobody applied it.
Hey everyone, Michael here. And on October 21st that year, that army pointed itself at one company, the one that runs a big chunk of the internet's phone book, and peaked around 1.2 terabits a second. GitHub, Twitter, Reddit, and Netflix. Gone for millions of people. And the part that still gets me is that none of it needed a genius. There was no 0-day, no stolen key, no insider, just baby monitors and cheap cameras still wearing the password they came in the box with. Every single one had a fix its owner could have clicked in seconds.
So let's define the fix, because it's the very first thing CompTIA tests you on in Domain 4. A secure baseline is your known good configuration. It's the documented, agreed-on state a device is supposed to be in, written down so it's not living in one person's head. Anything off that line is drift, and drift is where attackers live. The whole objective is just 3 moves around that one idea.
I'm May, and I think about a baseline the way my sister, the engineer, thinks about a control sample. Before you can prove a system is contaminated, you have to know exactly what clean looks like. The baseline is clean. It's the reference you measure everything else against. And there's a genuinely beautiful thing hiding in this objective. Once you've written down what clean looks like, security stops being a vibe and starts being math. You can literally measure the gap. We're going to put a real number on that gap later. Live in a terminal.
Grace here, and the exam wants 3 verbs in order, because the order is where people lose points. You establish the baseline, you deploy the baseline, and then you maintain it. Skip establish and you're guessing. Skip maintain and you're Mirai. The trap is always the last one. And establish has a shortcut most beginners miss. You don't invent the standard from memory, you inherit it. A CIS benchmark, or a DISA STIG, is a published, line-by-line hardening standard written by people who already made the mistakes. Each line comes with a control number and a reason, so it isn't opinion, it's a reference you can point an auditor at. You take it and tailor it, because a web server and a database server don't need the same rules, but you're tailoring a real document, not guessing from scratch. That's establish.
And 2 things top every one of those benchmarks because they're the 2 things that built Mirai: default credentials, the admin, and unused services, meaning every open port and running daemon nobody asked for. A default password is a door with the key taped to it. An unused service is a door you forgot you had. And that second one is sneaky because it costs you nothing today. The service just sits there humming, doing nothing useful, right up until the day someone finds a bug in it. You never used it, but an attacker will.
Picture the exact device Mirai loved. A cheap IP camera on someone's home network. Shipped with a password printed right in the manual. Online and never touched again. Multiply that by 600,000. Now let me draw the whole thing as a loop, because it's a cycle, not a chore you finish once. Michael, walk the room around it as it builds.
Here's the life cycle. First you establish, pick the standard and tailor it. Then you deploy, push that config to every device, ideally automatically. Then you maintain, you hunt for drift, the slow slide as admins make one-off changes, and you pull each box back to the line. And maintain feeds right back into establish when the standard itself updates. It never ends, which is exactly why it's so testable.
And notice the weak link. It's maintain every time. Deploy feels like victory, so everyone stops watching the second the config ships. That's where drift creeps in, and nobody's looking.
And that maintain gap is exactly where this gets real. It also raises the thing I think everyone's quietly wondering right now.
Right, and I'll just say it, because it's the one under every hardening video. If hardening is just locking doors, what exactly do I have to harden, and where does the list end? It's a fair question, and the honest answer is the list is longer than people expect, which is the whole reason CompTIA built an objective around it. So let's go meet it.
Perfect on-ramp. One quick note before we do. We host the free Security Plus practice quizzes and study notes at certs.professorerica.com, so once this clicks, go drill Objective 4.1 there. Now let's meet the 10 hardening targets and see why grouping them is the whole trick.
CompTIA hands you 10 hardening targets in Objective 4.1, and the trap is memorizing them as 10 unrelated chores. They're not. They're one idea: shrink the attack surface, aimed at 10 very different shapes of device. Group them and 10 becomes 3 families.
Start with the family everyone already gets: the endpoints, mobile devices, workstations, and servers. A phone gets hardened around the fact that it leaves the building and hops onto coffee shop Wi-Fi, so you lean on encryption, screen locks, and mobile device management, so if it's lost or stolen, you can wipe it remotely. A workstation adds a host firewall, application allow listing, and least privilege on top, because a real person does real work on it and clicks real links. And a server gets the strictest treatment of all, because it never leaves and it holds the data everybody wants. It's a standing target.
Second family, the network gear, switches and routers. The playbook narrows here, and there's a trap in it. Keep them in a locked space, change the default credentials, disable unused ports and management services, and patch the firmware. And here's the single most missed point on the exam for network gear. The dangerous thing on a switch usually isn't a data port. It's the leftover management service, an open telnet or an old SNMP string that lets an attacker reconfigure the device itself.
And the physical side is real too. A console port on an unlocked switch is a total bypass of every password you set. The locked rack is a control, not just tidiness.
Then cloud, which trips people up because it feels like somebody else's problem. It isn't. Cloud hardens in 2 places at once, and that split is the whole point of the shared responsibility model. The provider hardens the physical data center and the hypervisor. You harden your side. That's the instances you spin up, and, just as important, the cloud console itself, locked down with least privilege. The exam loves this line, so hold it. The provider secures the cloud, you secure what you put in the cloud. A wide-open admin role in that console is the new admin.
Which brings us to the third family, the one that makes this objective genuinely hard, and honestly the one I find most beautiful: the operational and embedded world. Industrial control systems and SCADA, embedded devices, real-time operating systems, and the whole sprawling bucket of Internet of Things.
And these break the normal rules, which is exactly the testable part. You can't reboot a turbine controller to patch it in the middle of a shift. A real-time operating system has to answer in a guaranteed window, so you can't bolt a heavy security agent onto it. And plenty of embedded devices have no patch from the vendor at all.
So the answer shifts. When you can't harden the device, you harden the space around it. Picture a factory line like this. You isolate it on its own segment, wrap it in compensating controls, and monitor it hard. That's the exact move Mirai punished people for skipping, because nobody segmented the cameras so one weak device could reach the whole internet.
Let me lay the difference side by side, because seeing the shift is what makes this stick instead of becoming 10 flashcards. 2 postures, endpoints and network gear. You harden the device directly with agents and patches, and you lock down the management plane. The operational and embedded world is different. You often can't touch the device, so you isolate it and monitor around it instead. Same goal every time, a different lever for each.
If you remember one instinct from this section, make it this. When the scenario is a turbine, a medical pump, or a factory controller, and it asks for the best action, the answer is almost never patch it now. It's segment it and monitor it.
Wait, so I just leave a known hole open forever? How is isolating it actually safer than fixing it?
Great instinct, and here's the answer. You're not ignoring the hole. You're making it unreachable. An attacker can only exploit a flaw they can touch. Put that vulnerable controller alone on a segment nothing else can route to, and the hole's still there, but the path to it is gone. That's what a compensating control means. You can't fix the weakness directly, so you wrap it in something else, isolation and heavy monitoring, that carries the risk instead. You remove the reachability, which is often the only lever you actually have on a box you're not allowed to reboot.
Right, but somebody still has to harden the reachable stuff.
Exactly, Michael, and that's the perfect cue. Enough theory. Let's stop talking about hardening and actually do it, on a real server, in a real terminal. The box is yours. Quick honest ask while we are here. If this has been worth your time so far, hit like, then subscribe and ring the bell. I know everyone asks, but this one is free and it is how a small channel like this actually grows.
This is a fresh Ubuntu server in an isolated lab, the kind of box you'd actually deploy, and right now it's wide open in the exact ways Mirai loved. Here's the thing nobody tells you when you spin up a new server. Out of the box, it is not secure, it's convenient, and those are opposites. The defaults are set to get you running fast, not to keep you safe. We're going to harden it line by line so you see with your own eyes what the exam means when it says secure baseline instead of just memorizing the phrase. The front door of a Linux server is secure shell, SSH, and almost everything you do to harden it lives in one file. Before I touch it, let me show you who can get in right now because the default is genuinely alarming.
Pull up the actual file, Michael. I want everyone watching the real config, not a slide about it.
There it is. Look at the two lines that matter. Root login is permitted and password authentication is on. That means an attacker can hammer the most powerful account on the box, root, with a dictionary of passwords all day long.
And that's precisely what both the CIS Ubuntu benchmark and the DICAS TIG flag as a finding. The standard doesn't say be careful. It says set permit root login to no, in writing with a control number. That's what establish means in practice. You're not guessing, you're applying a documented line.
Now before these two edits, there's a control 0 that's so obvious people skip it, and it's the literal Mirai lesson. If this box shipped with a default or vendor password, you change it first, before it ever touches a network. That one habit alone kills the entire attack we opened with. Then come the two edits. Kill direct root login and turn off password login so only a key works. Now if someone wants root, they log in as a named user first and then escalate, so every privileged action has a name on it, and a private key that never leaves your laptop can't be brute forced over the wire no matter how many guesses they throw at it.
And that second edit is the one that would have stopped Mirai cold. The whole botnet was a password guessing machine. Turn passwords off, and there's no password to guess. The attacker is knocking on a door that doesn't have a keyhole anymore.
Now the third piece, and it's not about SSH at all. It's everything else the box is running that nobody asked for. Remember, every listening service is a door. Let me show you what's actually listening.
There's the lesson in 3 lines. Port 22 is secure shell, you want it. Port 23 is telnet, an unencrypted relic that sends your password across the wire in plain text, and it should never run on a modern server. Port 25 is a mail daemon nobody on this box needs. 2 open doors for services you're not even using, and each one is a whole program an attacker can probe for its own bugs, completely separate from anything you actually run. That's why unused services are on every benchmark. The safest service is the one that isn't running.
So we close them, and then we put a default deny firewall in front of the whole box. Disable the dead services, allow only secure shell, and deny everything else by default. Watch the attack surface shrink for real. Before, a quick scan of this box showed 3 open ports. After disabling the services and turning on the firewall, I scan it again. 1.
3 doors down to 1. That's attack surface reduction you can measure. The 2 techs behind me do this for a living, and the whole job is exactly that. Take away everything that doesn't need to be there.
So it's beautiful on one box. But here's the honest question a real admin asks, and it's the one that separates a lab from a career. How do you actually know you got it right? You can't eyeball 100 settings and trust your own memory. And how on earth do you repeat this on 1,000 servers without missing one? Then prove months later that all 1,000 are still hardened?
Perfect question, Grace, and it has a perfect answer. You don't trust your own typing. You run an audit and let a scanner grade you. Let me bring up the report card, because the before and after is the most satisfying thing in this whole episode. One more control before we grade ourselves because it closes the Mirai loop directly. Turning off password login stops the brute force from working, but there's a difference between a wall and an alarm. Right now I've got the wall. I still want to know when someone's rattling the handle, and honestly I want the box to fight back on its own while I sleep. That's a whole different mindset, from blocking attacks to actively responding to them. The tool that does it is Fail to Ban. Fail to Ban does one lovely thing. It reads your authentication logs, and when it sees one IP failing to log in over and over, it bans that address with a temporary firewall rule, no human needed. Let me install it and check the secure shell jail.
Read that bottom line because it's the whole point. One address already banned automatically while we were talking. A Mirai node that tried this box would get a few guesses and then hit a wall the firewall built for it, with nobody at the keyboard.
And I love this one as a design idea because it changes the economics of the attack instead of the mechanics. Brute force only works with unlimited free attempts. Fail to ban makes attempts expensive. A few tries and you're locked out for an hour. Do the math the attacker does. If each guess costs an hour, cracking even a weak password stops being worth anyone's time. You haven't made guessing impossible. You've made it pointless. And pointless is often the strongest defense there is.
Now the report card. Lynis is an open auditing tool that runs hundreds of checks against your box and hands you one number, the hardening index, 0 to 100. I ran it before we started and saved the score. Then I run the exact same audit after R5 controls. Same tool, same box, same checks.
58 to 79. That 58 isn't a failure, by the way. It's completely normal for a fresh install, which typically lands in the high 50s to mid 60s. It's a starting line telling you how far you have to walk. And the checks that said suggestion now say OK. And here's the part that connects it back to the 3 verbs. That audit is the maintain step. You don't run Lynis once. You run it on a schedule, and the day the score quietly slides from 79 back towards 60, you've caught drift before an attacker did. The number going down is your early warning.
Which is beautiful on one box. That no real organization hardens 1,000 servers by hand, one SSHD file at a time. At that point, maintain becomes a completely different problem, and there's a genuine fork in how you solve it.
This is exactly where I want someone who runs baselines at scale for a living, not just on one lab box. Let me get our hardening specialist on the line.
Happy to jump in. The demo you watched is real, but on one box hardening is just a checklist. Across a whole fleet, the enemy is entropy, because every server starts drifting the moment a human logs in.
So in plain terms, Dane, what does maintaining a baseline actually look like on a normal Tuesday?
Boring on purpose, and boring is the goal. You write the baseline down as code, not as a memory in one admin's head who eventually quits and takes it with them. Then a tool rechecks every box against that standard on a schedule, fixes what drifted, and files a ticket the second one falls out of line.
Hold on, Dane. Doesn't a self-fixing tool just paper over a broken change?
Fair worry, and the honest answer is you need both. The tool pulls the box back so you're never exposed, and it logs the drift so a human can ask why. Skip that log and you're just hiding your own mistakes from yourself. One last thing for the exam. When systems slowly fall out of compliance after deployment, the word is drift, and the fix is continuous enforcement, not a one-time re-image that only resets the clock. That distinction is worth real points. Thanks for having me.
Perfect, thank you, Dane. And that for-key named, write it as code versus stamp it as an image, is a real argument good engineers have. So let's actually have it out. Here's the real-world fork, and good engineers genuinely split on it. You've got 1,000 servers to bring to a secure baseline and keep there. Michael would build one perfect box and clone it everywhere. Grace would write the baseline as code and let a tool enforce it forever. Both shrink your risk? They fail in completely different ways. Michael, make your case.
I build the golden image. You harden one machine perfectly, the way we just did. Every service trimmed and every line set to the benchmark. Then you capture that whole disk as a template, and every new server is a clone of that known good box. Hardening becomes copy-paste. A new box is already at the line on day one before anyone can touch it, which means there's no dangerous window where a fresh server sits online half-configured waiting to get owned. Speed is a security feature here, because the faster a box is born clean, the smaller its exposure.
It's fast, I'll give you that. But here's my problem with the image as a maintain strategy. The instant that clone boots and someone touches it, it starts to drift. An admin opens a port for a quick fix. A package updates itself, and 3 months later, your 1,000 identical clones have each quietly become different. The image was true exactly once, the moment you captured it.
Michael, that's the drift Dane just warned us about. Does your image survive it?
On its own, no. But a hardened box still has to exist before you can enforce anything, and the image is the fastest way to be born clean.
Born clean isn't born safe though, and that's my whole point.
Fair hit. So walk us through your way, because a box still has to start somewhere.
Gladly, it's configuration as code. Instead of a frozen snapshot, you write the baseline as a declarative file in a tool like Ansible or a Windows group policy. It says permit root login must be no, telnet must be absent, fail to ban must be running. Then the tool enforces that exact state on every box, on a schedule, forever. An admin opens that port. The next run closes it again. It doesn't just deploy, it heals.
And I'll concede the real strength there. Code is self-healing against drift in a way my image simply is not. That's a genuine point, not a small one.
Let me pull this together, because listening to you both, I don't think it's two camps at all. It sounds like one pipeline. The image handles birth, the code handles life. A box is clean because it's a clone, and it stays clean because the code keeps pulling it back. They're not rivals, they're a relay. Michael, does that hold up even for a tiny shop?
And to be fair to both sides, there are real cases where you lean one way. A tiny shop with 10 servers and no automation engineer is better served by a solid golden image than by standing up a whole config management platform they can't maintain.
True, and the reverse is just as real. A regulated enterprise with thousands of nodes and auditors at the door can't survive on snapshots. The drift would bury them. For them, the code investment isn't optional. So the honest answer really does depend on your scale and your staff.
So here's my verdict, and it's sourced to what the exam actually rewards. For deploy, a golden image or an automated build is the right speed play, so no box is ever born weak. For maintain, configuration enforcement is the call, because only continuous code catches drift, and drift is the exact failure CompTIA tests hardest. Watch the wording too. If the scenario stresses standing up new systems fast and identically, they're pointing at the image. If it stresses keeping systems compliant over time, they want the enforcement. So my recommendation for most shops is plain. Do both. Image to start, code to sustain, and let the question's wording tell you which one it's testing. That's the call.
And whichever path you pick, the very first line of any baseline is the same one Mirai begged people to skip. Change the default credentials before the box ever touches a network.
That's the episode. Establish from a benchmark, deploy at scale, maintain against drift, and prove it with a number you can actually watch move. Everything we did today, the SSHD edits, the dead services, fail to ban, the Lynis jump, was just those 3 verbs made physical on one box. If you carry one line out of here, make it this. A secure baseline isn't a document you write once and file away. It's a line you defend every single day, because the day you stop defending it is the day it quietly stops being true. Let's bring it home. A secure baseline is just a known good configuration that you establish from a benchmark, deploy to every device, and maintain against drift. And hardening is the simple, relentless act of locking the doors you never use, from a phone all the way down to a factory controller. Same 3 verbs, no matter the device, and the exam rewards you for knowing them in that order.
Here's what you can do tonight, on your own machine, and it's the same 3 verbs at home scale. Establish, look up what should be off. Deploy, change one default password and turn off one service you never use. Maintain, check it again next month. Do just that and you've personally shrunk the exact attack surface that built a 600,000 device botnet. The terminal you watched isn't magic. It's discipline you can copy.
The line I tattoo on the exam is the fork. Image to be born clean, code to stay clean, and the word drift as the trap answer whenever systems slide out of compliance after deployment. And don't get baited into reimage or repatch on those questions. Those reset the clock, they don't stop it. Enforcement is the answer that actually holds the line.
And mine is the shape of it. Endpoints and network gear, you harden the device. Operational and embedded, you can't, so you isolate and monitor around it. Same goal, different lever. Get that instinct, and the turbine questions answer themselves. Next time we open the wireless and mobile world, and wait until you see the trick where an attacker hardens nothing on your phone. They just stand up a fake network and let your device walk right into it. The front door isn't a cable anymore, it's the air.
If watching a real Lynis score climb made hardening finally click, that's exactly what this series is for, so hit like and subscribe and we'll keep building the whole SY0701 objective set with you, one real terminal at a time. The free practice quizzes are waiting at certs.professorerica.com. Before we go, here's the one thing only you can answer. Right now, how many devices on your own home network are still running the password they shipped with? Be honest and tell us in the comments. You came, you learned, you leveled up. Professor Erica here. I will see you in the next one.